Just a big sorry on behalf of Joe Rafferty, as Sarah said. This coronavirus thing seems to be interrupting all sorts of activity this week, and he's asked me to extend his apologies to you. He's a good Northern Ireland boy himself, and normally wouldn't waste any opportunity to get back over to you, but I'm afraid you're stuck with me today. Also, my colleague Claire Rotherham should be somewhere in the midst of this, and she'll be joining me for part of this presentation, I hope, for the second half of the slides. But my role as, I'm Michael Crilly. My role is as Director of Social Inclusion and Participation for the Merseycare NHS Foundation Trust. For those of you who don't know Merseycare, we're over here in Liverpool, and we are the community and mental health trust in this part of the world. And the service that I'm here to talk about today with Claire is our Liferooms, which is a non-clinical social approach to mental health that started out as a recovery service, but has, as it's evolved in the last 5 years, transformed into much more of a focus on prevention and population health and well-being. The reason Claire's joining me as well is I'm going to introduce something of the model and talk you through who we are and what we do and our journey so far. But Claire is our social health and research lead in the organisation, and she holds the line on the evaluation and the research around our model, the system change we're trying to engender, and also the impact on systems. It's been really intriguing to hear the conversation just before this slot around so many system challenges that we've grappled with as well in our own organisation. And I hope what you hear today will be of use to you. I'm known for being particularly wordy, some might say windy, so I'm going to do my best to crack on now so that actually Claire does, on this occasion, get a chance to do her part of this presentation without me waffling on. But
Michael, sorry, I'll just share my screen for the presentation.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire.
It's just saying that I'm not allowed to because I'm not a host. I was wondering whether Sarah or someone might be able to put it up for us.
Can we get our presentation?
Claire, you should be able to do it now.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah. Fab.
Brilliant. I can see that, and hopefully you can.
Is that okay?
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. That's great. On that opening slide, you see the presentation title that you're expecting, but actually there's 3 photos there, and they are photos of each of the 3 main Liferoom centres that we have here in Liverpool. The first one on the left you can see is a beautiful old Carnegie library. The one on the middle is a brand new building built on the site of a former clergy house. And the third one there on the right is set in a collection of high street shops in Southport, just north of Liverpool. I'm not here to talk about the design and the environment in which we deliver this model today, but you may want to ask about it later. But I think one of the points I'd really like to make is that I said earlier we're non-clinical in our approach in this service. And that's actually screamed out in our environments. We deliberately seek to look as unlike the NHS as we possibly can. So the only NHS blue you'll ever see in these buildings is the lanyards we wear around our neck. And as we go, you might see why that's the case. If we could perhaps just have the next slide, Claire. So what is this Liferooms? The Liferooms social model of health. You know, it came out of a realization for us as a mental health trust that the social determinants of poor health had a massive impact upon the recovery of our service users. So housing, education, employment, social connection, they're all going to have an impact on health and well-being. And for us as an organisation, we quickly realised when listening to our service users' experience is that a social model offers an opportunity to address these factors in such a way as to prevent further deterioration in health. The whole objective of this Liferooms social model of health for us is to reduce the size of secondary services that increasingly with mental health surge demand become unsustainable. What is it? The Liferooms offers two things here. It started out as a recovery service supporting people out of crisis and in the usual way. But actually what we've really realised is by opening up the interventions of recovery, the social interventions of the recovery movement, we've become a prevention service, and actually our power has become far greater in prevention, but we still do a huge amount of work around recovery. But effectively what we're trying to do is, through a range of services and mechanisms, is provide people with support to address social need, as well as opportunities to develop skills, and crucially build community and belonging. Those three photos we showed you on the first slide, they're all of spaces that are not in a clinical setting. They're at the heart of communities, and the prioritization of community as a social movement is absolutely key to the systemic change in Merseycare that we're trying to reach around our mental health model. So the Liferooms social model of health is the grand title that we give ourselves, and it's the term that we use to talk about this work, the broader aims of the Liferooms to encourage change within the health system that acknowledge the value of social models as opposed to clinical, not in opposition to clinical. Absolutely, social models are not in opposition to clinical, but it is a realization that people are not labels, they're not diagnoses, they weren't born to exist in isolation from other human beings. There's a society that needs to wrap around those individuals if we're to treat the whole person and deliver a really person-centered service. And the Liferooms service speak to, we find our roots quite neatly in a number of very, very current policy documentation over here that's produced by NHS England. So our long-term plan, our community mental health frameworks, these are all approaching mental health redesign and community mental health transformation in particular, to include a more proactive focus on health inequalities, preventative care, and flexible services that are about doing with the person, not doing to them, not that traditional patriarchal model that is as familiar to you as it is to us here in Liverpool. So the journey so far, that's a little bit about what we are, but the journey so far I think is really, really important. So the Liferooms journey began 5 years ago, probably even a little bit before that, to be honest, when, as an organisation that's always had a strong reputation for co-production and involving the voice of lived experience at every level of the organisation, in care, in delivering, in quality assurance and improvement, in governance, we had a bit of a change in senior leadership around that area. And when we delved into the service users and carers who were involved in our organisation, we began to question whether, through our good intentions about creating systems of democratisation and participation, which we're still committed to, I'm not backtracking on that, that we inadvertently also created a culture of dependency. Those of you who are involved in mental health closely will know that we're really good at creating cultures of dependency in mental health services. And the people that we got involved in the organisation in a really active way, we began to realise that they never really moved on. And we thought, if we're such a great recovery-focused organisation, why do these people never actually seem to move on? So we started to talk, and more importantly, we started to listen. And we were discovering more and more that the reason people didn't move beyond our services was because of the inequalities socially that existed out there in our community. The housing, the debt, the finance, social isolation, lack of education skills and opportunities. And we thought, we've got to do something about this. So we started to gather together a mixture of services and resources within the organisation to bring them together into one big department, which we call social inclusion and participation. And we were kind of surprised when we looked inwards by how much resource we actually had there. But we were also incredibly struck that whilst they all had a clear social focus, these resources were all based in clinical settings. And actually, the social issues weren't in the clinical settings, they were in the communities. And at the same time, we also discovered by listening to our service users that there was a real, almost pathological fear of the potential threat of closure to libraries across the city. 9 of the city's 19 libraries were due to close. And these libraries, we were really, really spellbound by how petrified people were, because they were safe spaces. They were places you could get away from fairly horrible accommodation at times, or poor relationships, away from your loneliness, where you could access resources, information, support, IT to support a daily job search before facing a benefit sanction. So we started to put these two things together. And we opened the first Liferooms in a beautiful Carnegie library in the north of Liverpool in May of 2016. It was a huge co-production process with mental health service users and people who delivered socially focused services to design both the environment and the types of services that exist within that building. And we opened that in May of 2016. It was pretty much an act of faith on the part of the board, but in response to the fact that this is what our service users said they wanted. Crucially, we took the decision that this couldn't just be about mental health service users. If our aspiration was about society, community, and inclusion, we had to open the doors to everyone. And it's opening the doors to everyone that's turned us into a prevention service. And the phenomenal numbers through our door is quite astonishing, because within a year, we opened further Liferooms in Southport, seaside town just north of Liverpool. A year later, within a further education college, looking at student mental health and well-being. And then last year, actually, it's like the year before last now, we're in January, I keep forgetting, we opened in a GP surgery, and also within the Playhouse Theatre at the heart of Liverpool, which is really quite a striking place to deliver a mental health service in one of the oldest theatres and music halls in the country. And then latterly, we've really branched out with our preventative wing, in that we've opened up particular focuses around our programmes of activity on wellbeing and social prescribing within GP surgeries, in primary care networks. We've worked with a great Northern Ireland tech for good company from Derry called Elemental to create a digital infrastructure in terms of how we refer people to over 120 different voluntary community sector community assets. And then we've added specific work streams around BAME and refugee and asylum seeking populations. And then, of course, COVID hit. We closed the buildings, and we weren't going to let that stop us opening new Liferooms. We launched in October of last year, World Mental Health Day, the new Liferooms online. And next slide, Claire. And here you see, if you ever get a chance to come and see a Liferooms, we're all about green. We don't do NHS blue, we do green. So even our rainbows are green. You've got a nice picture there, which in a sense, Claire will talk you through some of the substance of this, but our model is effectively built upon three core pillars of activity: learning, social prescribing, and community, for whatever that may mean for the given community in which we happen to be planted. And then flowing from that, we seek to prevent, we seek to enable through our social model. And within that, yes, we're transforming outcomes for individuals and their families and their communities, but really we're seeking to develop system change, move beyond conventional mental health models that are no longer sustainable, in such a way as that we activate our communities around their health and well-being. And then this is the last slide for me, and I'm going to hand over to Claire, but I think this is the absolute key point that we want to make by this. You know, I've used words like co-production, involvement, participation, and you can kind of do a buzzword bingo through some of these words in mental health services, and I'm not sure everyone has a common understanding of what we mean when we use those phrases. But for us, we talk about working side by side with the communities that we serve. So the Liferooms aims to design, develop and evaluate services in a side-by-side way. And that means that the service is shaped by everyone in the Liferooms community. This includes people who access, work and volunteer within the service, as well as those wider community partners. At no point in that definition do we use the label of service user or carer or staff. We talk about people and communities because that's what we're all about. After that little, long introduction that was as windy as I said it would be, I'll hand you over to Claire to take you through the next few slides.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Rotherham. My role is social health and research lead at the Liferooms. So like Michael said, focusing on developing our model and also evidencing the kind of efficacy of a social approach to mental health. But first, I just want to tell you a little bit about the services we offer, because Michael's talked through the model, what it aims to achieve, how we want to go about that. But I think it's important to know what do we do? What does that mean for the people we serve? So Michael mentioned the 3 key pillars: learning, social prescribing, and community. So learning, what does that mean? So for us, that means courses, learning opportunities, all free, all accessible to anyone, offering support, lots of stuff in relation to mental health, but not just mental health focused, physical health as well, but also cultural, creative opportunities, your art, your drama, music. People are more than just any kind of label that's attached to them, and kind of who are you, what's your interests, who are you, and how can we work with that to develop our offering. There's a real key focus on lived experience as part of that learning offer. So people who facilitate the courses will often have been in services themselves or have experiences of distress or illness as part of their own lives, and that's used as a key part of our learning offer. Social prescribing, what we mean by that is we mean one-to-one, generally, practical and socially focused support. So that is most often in areas that you can see there, so employment, housing, debt, things like that. But equally someone who might need to kind of support to build relationships within their life, to find community, to pursue a hobby or interest, to pursue an educational opportunity. So it can be really wide ranging. And our social prescribers, the people that offer that support, are not the be all and end all. They don't offer that advice just solely as themselves and their service. Our links with community and voluntary organisations is key to this. So this is an integrated approach. It's not saying the Liferooms offers a social approach in and of itself. We do it as part of the wider community system. So community and voluntary organisations are key to being able to offer people the support they need and want. Community is our 3rd pillar. It's a bit of a less tangible pillar, but is really, really a key part of what we do. So it's not necessarily offering someone an intervention, as you might say, or a learning opportunity or a social prescribing opportunity. It's about offering them a space to build community, to access community, to be a part of community. So our safe and welcoming environments are a key part of that, like Michael said, but also the community pillar is about offering people the opportunity to collaborate with us. So collaborating and working with community to understand needs, to understand wishes, and work with that to inform service design. So there are 3 pillars and what they entail. In terms of COVID-19, we can't kind of deliver this presentation without acknowledging the effect that that's had on our services. So COVID-19 impacts, so obviously, and as you guys have been talking about this morning as well, the impacts of COVID-19 on mental health services is great. Within our own organisation, Merseycare, there's been increased referrals to mental health services, unsurprisingly. Obviously, people are feeling the social and economic impact of COVID, and that's kind of exacerbating mental health struggles, as well as health inequalities, which of course were there prior to COVID, but are being made worse by our current situation. So that's the impact of COVID on mental health, or some of the impact. And we feel that the Liferooms, because we're an NHS service, we sit within Merseycare, but we are a socially focused service. So we are appropriately placed to respond to this pandemic, to respond to the impacts of this pandemic. Because if people need support with their mental health, we can escalate that. If people in mental health services are dealing more with social and practical issues, mental health, like clinicians, can kind of signpost that person into us. So there's that step up, step down approach into social, in and out of social support that we offer, and we think is really valid at this time. Restructuring of the Liferoom services, so Michael mentioned that, so I won't dwell on that, but we've, like everyone, moved everything as much as possible to telephone and online, and that is kind of what we're doing at the moment, but we're still offering those 3 pillars just via those services. I've just put something at the bottom there, which is a little quote from someone who accessed our digital program during lockdown. This was earlier on in lockdown. She kind of described the digital creative program that she accessed. So she was saying that this is very important because she's really done so well over the few months prior to COVID, and she feels that she would have just fallen back into what she calls her PTSD stress. But because she's had access to a digital creative program, this was a drama course she did, that gave a kind of reason and purpose and something to access and keep her going. So she felt that was really, really important. And then just to talk a little bit about impact and outcomes, it's really difficult to kind of summarize that quickly and briefly, especially just on one slide. But we've taken a diverse approach to kind of looking at impact of this social model. It's a difficult model, it's a challenging model to look at impacts because it exists in many forms and in many areas. It's not one intervention, it's a myriad of different interventions, and it interacts with other parts of the healthcare system. But I've tried to capture some of what we've done here. So on the left-hand side, you can see some of our activity, which is during the period of COVID, from April last year onwards to the end of last year, and gives you a sense of the amount of people contacting our Pathways Advice service, and that's the 5,500 number. So people accessing support for social and practical issues, and that's the amount of people we've had contact with over that period. The delivery of online sessions, whether that be via YouTube videos, whether that be via Zoom sessions, is captured on there. So capturing our activity and the vast amount of our activity during this time, we've been as busy, if not busier, than previously, really. On the right hand side, I've just tried to really briefly summarise some of our other explorations of impact in terms of the life room. So we've done an evaluation which may be of interest to some of the people on the call today around looking at secondary care clinical activity and whether accessing the life rooms affects that in any way. So we followed two cohorts, one cohort of people who came through the life rooms, the other cohort did not, and we looked at their secondary care mental health activity post coming to the life rooms. And what that showed was really interesting. Actually, during their intervention period, during the period they're accessing the life rooms, their secondary care clinical activity went up. So there's a potential positive message there really about activation and people being more activated in services, but then appears to come down at a quicker rate than the non-life rooms cohort after. So we're doing further work on that at the moment to expand that study and get more data in that regard, but that's an interesting first step for us. And then we spent a lot of time delving into the experiences of the people that use the service. You can tell a lot through a story, through someone's journey. They can touch on multiple parts of the system in what they tell you. So we've collected a lot of qualitative data and analysed a lot of qualitative data around people's experiences. I've just included a very short excerpt here of someone who came through our service, started doing a few courses, things about raising their confidence, but wasn't able to talk at first, felt very quiet, eventually plucked up the courage to talk. She accessed a Pathways advisor and eventually felt ready, and went on to become a volunteer, and she's been volunteering in our service for a little while now, and has now actually gone on to achieve employment within the wider trust. So yeah, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can measure impact and outcomes, and that's just a flavour, but obviously more than happy to kind of talk to any of that later or send through any further information.
Yeah,